This is a question I get all the time. Lots of you have asked this. Please tell us about the ancient education system. I think I've spoken about this before, but why not do it again? So, India's ancient education system dates back many, many thousands of years. It was it was based at the lowest levels. It had lots of hierarchical steps levels. At the lowest levels, education was given in temples. So, temples were centers of education. Every town, every city, every village, every neighborhood had a temple, and they would have a priest there, a priest who would not only officiate in religious functions, but who was also an educator. So these gurus essentially would educate the small children of the locality at the very basic fundamental level. They would be taught basic language, grammar. They would be taught the mother tongue. They would be taught Sanskrit. They would be taught grammar. They would be taught basic maths and various other basic subjects. As you grew older, you would go on to a larger temple where you would get more advanced education. The great temples of the country, the really great ones, would provide very high level education to those who had the intellectual capability to take it. And then you had the great viharas of India, where you had religious philosophies and traditions that were taught. So you had great Mahaviharas, etc., especially during the Buddhist times, which also taught the Vedas, etc. And then you had the great universities: Takshashila, Nalanda, Telhara, Vikramshila, Udantapuri, Shardapit, many, many, many more. We have lost track of how many universities we have. They are all in ruins today, thanks to the Turkic invaders. So this university, let's take Nalanda, the most famous one. Nalanda was destroyed when India was in the Buddhist so-called era. So many of these teachers in Nalanda were Buddhist monks. The last recorded teacher in Nalanda is was an was a was a gentleman called Rahul Shribhadra. He was teaching a small class of about 50 students even after the university was destroyed, and he was in his 90s at that time. So Nalanda was a center of Buddhist education, and the same teachers who taught what is now called Buddhism also taught the Vedas, also taught all kinds of other subjects. So everything was taught there in these great universities, and the only barrier to admission was your intellect. So you would have to go through a series of examinations and oral tests. You would have to answer questions from the great gurus, and if you were able to answer these questions satisfactorily, then you would be given admission to the university, and all education was entirely free. It was all subsidized and funded by the local kings. The entire universities were subsidized by the kings. There was no salary. Everybody lived there. The teachers, the students, they were living quarters. All the food was provided. Everything was taken care of by the local king or emperor, whoever it was. So education throughout India was always free. Healthcare throughout India was always free. That is the mark of a civilization, of a truly civilized society. Education and healthcare, if you have to pay for it, it means you're living in a backward society. And India always imparted education and healthcare for free. So that is the system of education. Men and women were all equally allowed. Even foreigners were allowed if they could pass the exams. There was no uh, so-called caste or class divide that we speak about today. There was no such thing. Everybody was allowed in the education system as long as they had the intellectual capacity for that. Even foreigners, even Greeks came as students. Scythians, there are records of Scythian students, and even Chinese students. So if foreigners were allowed into this system, why wouldn't the other Indians be allowed? So that is in brief about the Indian education system. It is the most advanced system of education the world has ever seen. Education itself was invented in India, and it has been going on for thousands of years. At the lowest level, it was called the Guru Shishya Parampara. So you would spend several years with a guru, and that guru would teach you most of what you needed to know, especially when you were in a certain trade. If you were a warrior, then your guru would teach you the Vedas, the Shastras, the language, mathematics, and martial arts. An example is Dronacharya, the teacher of the Kauravas and Pandavas in the Mahabharata, especially the Kauravas, isn't it? So that is how old this education system was, and it is regrettable that we have replaced it with this primitive, backward colonial system that is currently in place today, especially the commercialization of education, which is extremely harmful to the long-term prospects of the country. So education is all about preparing the future generations of the country to be great, to be good, productive citizens, and to be great leaders in the future. That is the purpose of education. And today's education system is not geared towards that. It's just a commercial system which churns out degrees in exchange for cash. So it is a great step backward for India, but I hope that some at some point in time we will try and reform this.